It is my pleasure to bring you Sal this morning. Sal Holden just launched her book, Thrive: Overcoming Burnout and Reclaiming Energy. And she is a kinesiologist and a burnout coach, which is so important these days to have some help getting through that. It happens to the best of us. So, Sal, would you like to describe a little bit about what you do and what you're up to right now?
Absolutely, Paige, and thank you so much for having me here. It's an absolute delight, and a big hello to everyone watching as well. And I've currently, literally, just come out the other side of launching my book, Thrive, which is really, as Paige said, about overcoming burnout and really getting that energy and passion back again as well. So, in terms of how I actually do that, I support women through creating greater awareness of the deeper belief systems and the patterns that have kept us stuck, as well as what's actually going on in our nervous system as well, which I think Paige and I will dive into a deeper conversation around that today, which will be wonderful and very much around health and vitality, but healing on all levels. So, mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually as well. So, really powerful tools and strategies that is both in the book, but also that I help my clients with as well.
Oh, thank you. And I'm excited for your book launch. Sal and I have been in the inspirational book writers together, and that's how I met her. Um, and we both practice kinesiology, and we both are aware of, as you said, the fact that we have many bodies, and not just this physical body and the spirit, which some people are familiar with those too, but also an emotional body and these energies that influence the way we think and the way we feel, and we get to play with the invisible, so to speak, in the work that we do.
Absolutely. Yeah. Such a beautiful way of putting it, and being aware of these parts of ourselves as well, for sure.
Yes. Well, I would love to talk about. So we have three great topics to hit on today, which are vitality, freeze, and intuition, all of which light me up a lot. But let's start with the freeze. I think freeze is an important aspect of the nervous system, especially when it comes to women, because a lot of women are in what we would say freeze. And that's really affecting everything about their lives, but particularly relationships with themselves and with other people. So could you please speak about that?
Absolutely. And it's been something that's been very dear to my heart, because I don't think that I actually was aware or realized how much of my life I was actually living in high functional freeze. And there can be chronic freeze, there can be momentary freeze. And one of the things that I've definitely discovered through working with so many people with burnout, and certainly experiencing that myself as well, was when we go into burnout, the body literally drops into chronic freeze as a way of trying to conserve energy. So it's really understanding that freeze is a way that our body is literally trying to protect us and keep us safe. And sometimes when we've had a lot of experiences, perhaps in our childhood, or we haven't learned how to feel safe, or that wasn't modeled to us in our experience, that is where our body can actually go. And it can be so paralyzing. I know for me, I really had a lot of trouble speaking up, being an advocate for myself, saying no when I actually really needed to speak up and verbalize that as well. And particularly in any situation where we're triggered, I feel that that can really paralyze us from actually taking care of ourselves in whatever way that we actually need to. But not only that, when it comes to empowerment, it's really difficult to feel empowered and to be living within that free state as well. And I talk about the nervous system and about increasing capacity as well. And I think when we've had, event after event or experience after experience, which we haven't had the space or the safety to actually fully process those experiences through the nervous system, we lose capacity. It's literally like a glass just getting fuller and fuller and fuller. And what I've learned over time is the more that we can just gently, without overwhelming ourselves, start to empty out that glass a little bit and start to process and complete some of those experiences within the nervous system. And obviously, kinesiology kinesiology is a beautiful way of actually releasing some of those things from the cellular level. But that also really adds to expanding our capacity because there's now more space in the glass. We've got more movement for the ebbs and flows of life, which life is always going to happen. And the other way that we can really start to expand that capacity is through our physical vitality, which we'll obviously get into as well. But by, even having greater sleep and all of those aspects too can make such a difference in our life. So,
Thank you, thank you. So I'd like to stay on freeze for just a moment because um, many people know that the response to stress can be fight, flight, fight, freeze, or fawn. Um, but you said something important, which is that our capacity can increase if we deal with the freeze. And I think to someone who is experiencing freeze due to trauma or overwhelm, they may not want to increase their capacity because it feels overwhelming, quite frankly. Um,
totally.
so, um, what what can someone, if someone finds themselves in that state where they're burned out, I mean, they can go through the motions perhaps, um, but not more than that. What advice do you have for them as the first steps of getting out of freeze so that they maybe do want to broaden their capacity at some point?
Absolutely. I think the two most important things is definitely mindset. So ensuring or working with the belief systems that are paralyzing us, all the thoughts that are coming up. One thing that I certainly experienced, and I've seen this across the board as a universal experience, is our inner critic becomes super, super, super loud. The more compromised we become within that free state. And often there can be a deeper level or experience of shame or feeling that we're not enough, that we're not doing enough, that we should be doing more. And we put a lot of internalized pressure on ourselves. And if you can imagine somebody standing behind you and putting their hands on your back and pushing you forward, that's often unconsciously what we're actually doing to ourselves. And that creates a lot of extra resistance in our system. And so the first step is often having compassion for ourselves and where we're actually at. And that can feel so difficult, again, when our mind is beating us up and being really harsh on us. And I had years of coaching under my belt when I went into my own experience of burnout. And that was really, really difficult at that time to realize how much my mental state was impacted. So, getting some support, whether that is through reaching out either to myself or to a practitioner or somebody that you really resonate with that can really support you with healing the inner critic or working with those beliefs and thoughts to give and you'll feel a visceral shift within the nervous system. I like to use the Byron Katie process. I find it incredibly helpful. She's got amazing books that can even be supportive just in listening to those books. So if somebody's at rock bottom or feeling completely burnt out, completely overwhelmed, just working at those pieces little bit by little bit. The other piece is just small daily incremental changes. And I write in my book in the foundational principles of less is more. Because when we're overwhelmed, and generally the pattern that's taken us into exhaustion or burnout or freeze is that we've put so much pressure on ourselves to do all the things. And so often that pattern can repeat with our healing, feeling that we have to be doing everything. Otherwise, we're failing or we're just not getting there quick enough, or all of those different pressures. So I think having compassion for our journey, knowing that it can take time. And it can be difficult because I know when we feel so awful, the first thing we want is just to feel better. And yeah, one of the pieces I found as well super helpful was just I'm warming up to awesome. That's what I used to say to myself if I was really
Love.
slow in the morning, just taking a little bit of time and or I'm looking forward to feeling a bit better. Because again, we hypnotize ourselves with our language. I'm exhausted, I'm tired, I don't know what's wrong with me. But we can shift that into I'm looking forward to feeling a bit better. It still honors how we're actually feeling, and it's also forward focusing, meaning it's taking us to where we want to go as well.
Oh, I love both of those phrases, particularly warming up to awesome. That's good. Um, yes, and I can definitely relate to this. I after having four babies in a row, fairly close together, found myself in chronic fatigue, And it was a slow process of learning what worked for me and what didn't work for me, boundaries. And I remember sometimes it would be the smallest tweak and it would give me just a little boost of energy, and then I would keep that thing in my life. I remember digestive enzymes were one of those tweaks. um, but I like that you said to be compassionate with
Yeah.
ourselves, because I think that is the first thing that needs to happen is to just be kind. And as far as allowing rest in the life and that reframe and the slowdown, that can be really just as hard as pushing, and
Mm.
pushing can be the permission to rest.
Absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree with you. And in terms of physical support as well, like magnesium is so immensely important. Often there's a lot of inflammation with mitochondrial function and things like that when people go into that freeze state. So definitely having some additional support, a vitamin C, really helps to clear some of that inflammation, helps to clear out the excess cortisol, all of those things, they all stack together in incremental ways as well. And the way that I've also written the book is quick tips to implement, because I know people that are low in energy reading the book. Again, I didn't want to take them into overwhelm. So it was kind of like expanding a little bit on the topic and then just giving one or two small easy steps to be able to take, and that may not feel easy on that particular time, but it's just a small incremental step that will compound to make a big difference, added together over weeks and months as well. So yeah, I love what you shared about that as well too, Paige. And sometimes it's just experimenting with what did actually really help, and certainly that was my journey, and everything I've written in the book was everything that worked or supported me in my increasing my energy as well. Definitely. Mm.
Well, I really think that was a thoughtful step for you to take to format your book in that way, first of all. And I think that it is important for our listeners to remember that everyone's different, and really they need to decide what works for them. This is not one size fits all, and it very much is a puzzle of all the bodies, all the energy systems, and they are all tied together, which is also why I have chosen to include some lifestyle components and physiology support in my modality, because I think let's treat the whole person, and that's why we're doing this holistic summit and having this interview about holistic practices, because really we're looking at a whole human being and a whole person here, not
Mm.
just the way they think.
Absolutely, 100%. And it is all inextricably linked, as you mentioned, where, yeah, when we affect one in a positive or negative way, it has that effect on all other aspects of ourselves as well. So, really understanding that can really make a huge difference in our overall healing, completely, as opposed to maybe working on our mental health, but still craving sugar and still having high carbohydrates and not sleeping well and all of those sorts of things as well. So yeah, it definitely all fits together.
So what do you want to say about vitality? So what when you use the word vitality, what does that mean to you?
I think vitality is really about having the energy to do the things that we want to be doing. And not only that, it really adds to our emotional joy. If we're feeling sluggish or exhausted or burnout or even in the freeze state, it is really hard to act upon the things that take us towards our dreams or create our reality in a way that really supports us. So I truly believe vitality is really having the energy to be able to put towards whatever is going to light our heart up, bring us joy, and is an expression of our soul essence as well, our most authentic self. So that vitality piece, I think it stems in lots of different ways in the four bodies, as we spoke about, mentally, emotionally, physically, and and spiritually. And I truly believe spirituality, or that spiritual body is really just a deeper connection with our most authentic self as well. And there's so many different ways that our life force, energy, and vitality can be impacted if we're not being true to ourselves, if we're constantly overgiving and then feeling anger or resentment. Those things are also going to cut us off from our vitality or from our life force energy. Or if we feel in a conflict, we're stuck in a situation or a job, or perhaps earning income in a way that doesn't align with our values, that can definitely feel like an inner conflict as well. And it's kind of like kinking the hose where only a little bit is trickling out as well. So vitality really, and even if I just talk more specifically about physical vitality as well, I feel like most people know what they need to be doing. However, it's the implementation of that which can really hold them up. And if they're feeling exhausted, it is even harder to implement some of those things. And that's where I do come back to my principle: less is more. Just start with one thing, whether it's just an extra glass of water a day. And one of the things that I also really like to share with vitality is add more of the good things in. Don't worry about trying to take things out. That can often feel like deprivation to people, and feels like now I've got to have all this willpower. And if we're low in physical energy, it's very hard to rally willpower in that sense. So the more that we can add more of the good things in. So instead of worrying about cutting out coffee, just add more water. Instead of worrying about cutting out sugar to begin with, add more protein to balance out the blood sugar and things like that. So, and even with sleep, instead of worrying about like screen time and things like that, just getting to bed earlier. Can definitely make a difference. All the other things are definitely important to be aware of and to perhaps minimize over time, but adding more of the good things in naturally will start to curb some of the other things as well. So I think that makes a huge difference. And yeah, there's so many different ways, obviously, that we can increase our physical vitality. But I think one of the most important things is really, really good quality sleep. And that's also why sharing with all of the listeners my sleep guide as well was one of the things I thought for a long time. 6 to 4 hours of sleep, that oh no, I'm totally fine with that. And it turns out I was not totally okay with that. And a lot of studies show if we're getting less than 6 hours sleep, our cognitive function is equal to that of somebody that's been drinking alcohol. So that was a huge wake up call to me.
Yeah, that's sleep is really important in my life, and I didn't realize how I could feel until the kids were flew the nest and I was getting consistent sleep. And it really took a few years for me to catch up. But once I did, I started feeling better again. Um, and I really like that you brought into this conversation living by our values, because I just listened to a great talk by John DeMartini, and he verified what I have known all along, and something that I use in my practice, which is that when we're not living by our values, we are causing dissonance in the body. So we're unwell in some way whenever we're not living by our values, and it could be depression or emotional patterns that aren't so helpful and healthy. And it can also ultimately be manifest in unwellness in our health. And so it really is important to know what those values are and to make the changes in our lives that allow us to exercise them to be well.
Absolutely. And it is also another one of the sections that I have in the book as well, of understanding the healing inner conflicts, because often our values are just values, or when we have an inner conflict, it can often just be a conflict between values, but also needs as well. And one of the things that I've come to understand over time and just experimentation with this with myself was really understanding Tony Robbins' framework of the 6 human needs, and how we can be unresourceful in trying to get those needs met, and how sometimes we take action to get those needs met in a way that is against our values. And what I discovered was that if I could meet those 6 human needs, and just for any of the listeners that aren't aware of those, that's certainty, uncertainty, or variety. significance, connection, and love, as well as growth and contribution. They're the six human needs. If we can get those needs met in a way that is totally aligned with our values, I truly believe that equals authentic happiness. I've never been happier in my life when that is what's going on, if that makes
Yes,
sense. So yeah, I
I
think
love that.
understanding that.
Well, and I've been thinking a lot about this as well. These human needs, because it actually does fit into a larger model, and it can affect the quality of your employees, for example, in the workforce. And when we have our structure set up in our lives, in our homes, and in our businesses, where we get to live by our values and take care of the needs, we know that humans thrive, and we know that life and business thrives. So there are so many implications to living in that way.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I've dedicated an entire chapter to that, to elicit your values, to understand perhaps where there might be either values conflicts or needs or values conflicts, in that, to be able to reframe some of those things, because sometimes we can just have beliefs that aren't necessarily serving us, such as if I leave the job, I either have to stay to have my financial income, or, and be unhappy in that job. So, like, really understanding you actually get to have both. And when we change that perspective or change that belief system, we often can create that or find the opportunities in our life that actually really align with that. So, it doesn't always have to be a conflict. Sometimes it's just a shift in our perspectives of all of those things. And just the same as rest and productivity, it's like, oh, when I rest, I actually become more productive. So it's really understanding it's not a this or that, it's a this and that, which can really just help to shift things and increase our energy as well.
Yes. Okay. So we're speaking about some subtle shifts here, many subtle shifts that lead to a big difference. So
Mm.
speaking of shifting our perception, that brings us to your point of intuition. So would love to dive into that.
Absolutely. I think one of the most important things is really coming back to our most authentic self, to be able to actually tap into our own intuition and our own inner wisdom. When we're living by the shoulds, the have tos, the need tos, the programming and the conditioning, perhaps that we received when we were growing up, believing we needed to be this way in order to be loved and accepted, it leads us away. Ultimately, it's our what I call the ego survival mind running us, as opposed to actually being guided by our soul essence or our heart, our spirit, our intuition, our inner wisdom, whatever you want to call it. It's that beautiful energy that really can lead us forward and into our most amazing creative abilities, and really living a life that feels really, really aligned for who we actually really are. And being able to tap into that, we need to raise our frequency. And again, that was one of the biggest challenges, when I was going through burnout, was my energy was so low, my emotions were so low. I felt powerless, I felt helpless at that time because of what I was experiencing in my physical body. And it was at a desperate time when I absolutely needed to be tapped into my intuition, but it was like being tuned into the wrong radio frequency, if that makes sense. And so the more that we can support our vitality, support our well-being, increase our energy, that increases our frequency, that increases our emotional energy. And I believe frequency and emotional energy are exactly the same thing, or vibrational energy, whatever we want to call it. It's all the same thing. And so when we are making these incremental changes, the more we get to tap into those higher energy states, whether that's doing something that brings you joy, or lights your heart up, or feels better in some way, shape, or form, even a feeling of relief is heading in the right direction. Particularly if you are in a lower energy state, that was what I looked for. I had a dear friend that was like, just go do things that bring you joy. And it's like, everything I used to do that brings me joy, that brought me joy, no longer brings me joy because of where I'm at. So just finding relief, raising
Mhm.
very gently our emotional energy can have us tap even deeper into that intuition again, to be able to really know what is really right and true for ourselves. And again, that's not in a moral context or anything else. It's really knowing what is the right step forward for you. And I truly believe we have our own blueprint, we have our own guidance as to what is right and correct for us, and that expression of our soul lessons from that place. And one thing I always like to share, I think sometimes it can be really hard to distinguish between what our ego survival mind may be saying to us and the voice of intuition. And for me personally, I've always found the voice of intuition tends to be quieter. It's definitely calm, and it tends to be just a repetitive voice over and over. For me, it was like, write the book, write the book. I don't believe it will ever yell or scream, or it's not fear based. And that's how we can kind of tell the difference between our fear or ego survival mind. Will always yell, berate, criticize, judge, be very, very loud and very panicked in its expression of what it believes that we should do. So
That's
being able to
right.
really tap into that intuition, that calm, wise whisper, and often we can only get that or listen in or tune into that inner feeling or intuition, or even images, or that might be more auditory for some people, is through creating space and time to actually drop in at that deeper level as well. We can't access it when we're busy, when we're rushing from day-to-day stresses. Yeah.
Ah, thank you. Yes, that's a good litmus test is the tone of the voice. If it's critical or fearful or something that someone not nice would say to you, it's probably not intuition. And if it's kind and wise and and um, still, then
Mm.
that's your intuition. Some of the most important decisions I've ever made in my life were very small, intuitive nudges that made a big difference when I actually paid attention and have completely, yeah, changed the trajectory of my life. So
I love
thank
that,
you.
Paige. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. And we need to wrap up our interview because our time is almost up. But are there any final words that you would like to say? And also, I would like to hear your definition of empowerment.
Absolutely. I think really empowerment comes back to connecting with ourselves at the deepest level, knowing our own truth, and being able to live that, having the courage in our heart to move forward and to be able to make those choices. And that was one thing I was going to say just on the intuition piece as well, is sometimes when we get that intuition, our ego survival mind becomes really loud because it may threaten, or may be taking us in a direction that feels very fearful for the ego survival mind. So really being able to trust ourselves, I think, really comes back into a deep level of being able to empower ourselves to actually take action on the things that are most important to us and live our most joyful life, or our most happiest life as well. And the more we can raise our energy, the more vitality we have on board, the more we're dropping into our authentic self. I truly believe all of those things really support us to live a more empowered life as well. So,
Thank you. Thank you, Sal, for reminding us of the importance of being gentle with ourselves, of taking small and easy steps, sometimes with just that reframe of um, a little reprieve. It doesn't mean we need to take leaps and bounds out of our overwhelm, but just the little things, and starting with being kind to ourselves and our thoughts. And thank you for speaking to intuition and vitality. And your book is, I haven't read it yet, but it's been on my radar because our group is talking about it. We're all abuzz with it. And I wish you the best success and that many people can find you and be helped by Thrive.
absolutely. Thanks so much, Paige. And included, obviously, in the gifts with today's talk as well is a free copy of Thrive as well. So you'll get that as part of all of that as well. So I'm very excited to be able to share that with people, and hopefully it really can make a difference for people's lives, and particularly if they're lower in energy or just feeling a bit fatigued, exhausted, or even just a bit jaded. I think many of us after the last 4 years have experienced that feeling from time to time. So having a great list of tools can be so supportive. Mm.
Absolutely. It has been it's been rough, hasn't it? Um, and thank you for your generosity. I can't wait for people to get this in their hands. Thank you, Sal.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Paige. It's been an honor to be here.
Take care.